By 1890, the lumber boom was over. Saginaw remained Michigan's third largest city and sat at the heart of rich farmlands, but jobs were disappearing and people were starting to move away. The community still had lots of resources, railroads, skilled workers, and most important, the Saginaw River, but the city's future was uncertain. Would Saginaw reinvent itself or shrink to mere memories of the glory days of the lumber boom? It took more than 20 years for the city to reinvent itself. It was a time of experimentation with some failures and some successes. When the first car arrived in Saginaw, it sparked imagination about what Saginaw could be. There were several car companies that made complete vehicles in the area, but with little success. What really took off was car parts manufacturing. In 1880, John L. Jackson started a foundry and machine shop to make and repair equipment for the lumber mills. In 1894, Edgar Church joined the business and helped it transition from lumbering equipment to new products. Jackson and Church then became partners with Melvin Wilcox. They decided to focus on making auto parts. The Jackson Church and Wilcox Company learned that Buick Motor Company was having trouble finding a suitable steering mechanism for its cars. During that time, Wilcox had been working on a prototype steering gear, and his double thread and half nut gear, known as the Jaycox gear, was an immediate success. So successful, in fact, that Buick bought the entire company in 1909 to increase production. A year later, General Motors bought Buick and ramped up the Saginaw plant's production even more, and the Saginaw plant became known as Jaycox. Later, this division would be the first General Motors unit set up exclusively for parts manufacturing. In order to make all these parts, Saginaw needed foundries. A foundry pours hot liquid metal into molds to make car parts. Saginaw Malleable Iron Foundry was started in 1917. The foundry was so important to General Motors that they bought Saginaw Malleable in 1919. That same year, another foundry called Gray Iron began car parts production. They provided parts for Cadillac, Oldsmobile, GM trucks, Buick, Pontiac, and Chevrolet. Demand grew in the 1920s, and Gray Iron was dubbed the Queen of the foundry industry. The foundries grew rapidly because the demand for car parts was great. Saginaw became known as a place that provided steady and good-paying jobs. Soon, Saginaw did not have enough workers, and the companies needed to recruit workers from all over, which included many African American and Hispanic people. This new diversity was not always welcomed by the community, and neighborhoods became segregated. Often the least desirable jobs were left to non-white workers. Women also worked in the plants, and not just during World War II. They too were only allowed to do certain tasks, but women worked in the plants right from the start. By the 1970s and 1980s, the U.S. began to produce fewer car parts, and so they needed fewer employees. Once again, Saginaw found itself in a decline. The steering gear that put Saginaw on the automotive map is still manufactured here by a company called Nexteer. They now make several kinds of steering gears and other parts, but the company is not as big as the automotive production once was. Saginaw reinvented itself before, so perhaps it can do it again. What ideas do you have for Saginaw's future?
This program was made possible by a grant from CTN, the Community Telecommunications Network.